So imagine turning up to one of your biggest bike races of the year and your power meter leaves the chat. No watts, no numbers, you just have to pace it on heart rate and feel. Well, that's what happened to me at the last weekend's British Time Trial Championships, where I just about managed to hang on to third place by the skin of my teeth, but the top three on the podium were not separated by much at all. In this video, judging by popular demand on the comment I left in the last video, you wanted to see a bit of a breakdown or inside analysis using the Strava segments and try and learn in a bit about how I paced it without the power meter. So before we get into it, I found this book, The Power Meter Handbook by Joe Friel. It's quite an old one, and there's actually a table in here that's taken from Alan Couzens, I think. It basically talks about how to pace an undulating time trial. It's very brief, but the fundamentals are you have a goal speed in mind or goal power. Whenever you hit a climb and that speed is well below your target average speed, you press harder, you produce more power, more effort. And then when you crest that climb, you hit the descent, you basically, you guessed it, you freewheel, you coast, you try and recover. Now with that explanation out the way, let's jump into Strava and see what it's saying. So here's my ride. We average 168 beats per minute, max 175. That is the estimated power there, by the way, before you get caught out. And our average speed is 40.5 kilometers per hour with a maximum of 71.6. Now here's the course, and you can see we have a climb to begin, 2 kilometers. We have another climb over here, which is about 1 kilometer. It's actually slightly longer than that. And then we have this big section here, which is ever so slightly uphill for a long period of time, before we have a big descent near the end of the course, which was actually into a 20 mile an hour, or it definitely felt like more than that, headwind. So lots to think about on this course, and one that I think would have been better ridden with a power meter. Now, it certainly wouldn't have made a massive difference, but I think it would have made a bit of a difference all the same. It certainly wouldn't have hindered me having a power meter, and that's why power meters are so valuable, is because they are extremely good pacing tools. You know, you can get instant feedback with a power meter, and unlike with heart rate and how the effort feels, it's not delayed. I didn't know how much over threshold I was, and that's the danger. The longer you spend over threshold, the more matches you're burning per se, so I didn't really want to be spending a whole lot of time above a certain effort, and without the power meter I wouldn't actually know the exact figures or time. This first climb was just under 4 minutes. You just had to get over it as fast as possible, in my opinion. And then you had this big bit of recovery down this descent. Now my heart rate doesn't initially come down. We come down this technical descent at the end through a village, and my heart rate does tend to drop off then, because I'm actually not producing any power at all on that part of the descent. So I make sure to still ride quite hard here. I'm looking at my speed all the time. I'm monitoring how fast I'm going. I know if I'm starting to go downhill, I will ease off slightly. I won't continue to push as hard as I am on the flats or on the climbs. There was a couple of rollers on this section that were, they kind of catch you out. Like you can see the speed graph here, it's going up and down quite sharply because these rollers were quite punchy, which is 6% for a kilometer, and I make up quite a lot of ground here actually. And then we crest over the top and have a big descent into the village of Settle. Those of you that know me, I have pretty fast heart rate recovery. That comes with, you know, general fitness and long-term training, of course. But then that's the lowest heart rate I see throughout the whole event. However, I quickly get back into a rhythm, but this section here is definitely fast. If we look at the peak pace, for example, we look at the highest 5 kilometers of the whole, the fastest 5 kilometers of the whole race. It's this section here. Now we are in a cross tailwind, but I knew this would be a fast section. So in terms of producing big effort, I didn't really think about doing that here. Same goes for the fastest 10-kilometer section. It's virtually in the same place. The really long sustained effort is the last 40 minutes, the last 25 kilometers. This is where I really dig in and I try to maintain a consistent effort throughout. There's a couple of sharp climbs and some really shorter descents because they're so fast. And you can see there's lots of variance in the speed on the graph there. It's not, it's not smooth. It's not going up and down in a smooth way. There's lots of sharp, jagged edges to that speed graph. My heart rate is actually at the highest it's been for a sustained period throughout the whole time trial. Now, where I got this idea of riding at around 165, 170 beats per minute for the hour was this ride I did in Tenerife a couple of months ago. So I used that as the base, really, for what I thought I could sustain. Plus, when you do a lot of training sessions around this sort of intensity, you start to build an idea in your head of what you can sustain. The sections where you're climbing, you don't want to be going too deep, but you still want to be getting over them as fast as possible. You don't want to be spending any longer than you have to riding at a slower speed. And then once you start going quite fast, it is really about aerodynamics and just trying to recover a little bit before the next section that you have to try and squeeze on that. Now, let's have a look then at where I lost time. Now, I need to find the winner, which is Alex Pickering. And actually, Phil Williams there was second, so this is really good. So you can see the time differences there. Now, Alex is neck and neck with me, virtually, up until roughly the halfway point. And then I start to lose time, and it's in the cross headwind section. Cross headwind, and then I'd say the headwind section towards the end. But it's a steady loss of time over that 20-kilometer period, quite possibly down to aerodynamics, rider power, and also rider weight. So if we look here, for example, where we drop off into the headwind but down a very steep, fast descent, this section here I actually lose quite a few seconds in a very short space of time, and that's because I didn't go downhill very fast. Looking at Alex's data, looking at my data, you can even look at the descent here, and I lose time on this descent, and I lose time on that final descent. The only blip is actually this section here, which I can't really explain. I don't know how my performance was because I didn't have a power meter, but I can only assume that Alex was riding to a perfect pacing strategy and was monitoring his output the whole way and was therefore squeezing when he needed to as we started to climb and go uphill here. So if that's the case, that's a phenomenal way of gaining time on your competition, of course. Now, looking at second place, Phil, so just a quick comparison to me and Phil, this is where I lost in gain time to Phil. So really, Phil was ahead of me the whole race. Even, this section here and this section here was the highest, or rather, this was where he was virtually the furthest away from me during the time trial. I gradually pull him in, and then I gradually lose time again. But you can see how much time visibly I gain on the climbs. As short as they are, 2 minutes in length, I'm gaining between 15 and 20 seconds in quite a short space of time. As you'd probably expect. We'll have a sneaky look at the winner's power and heart rate data. This is Alex Pickering's winning ride. He obviously didn't stop at the pub here, of course, but here's his power data, and it's interesting to see how hard that first section was. You can see that by a really high heart rate, and actually the highest sustained heart rate throughout the whole event, as I think the idea is at least to try and clear these first two climbs as fast as possible. If we actually look at that section, the first section, into that cross tailwind, I think here I put almost 16 seconds into Alex and, well, only 1 second into Phil, which is negligible basically. But I do wonder if I actually went off too hard and if I paced this section badly because I didn't have a power meter. Because those are the major 2 climbs in the course, I suspect then I was riding slightly too hard, and although my heart rate towards the end of the time trial looks like it's quite settled, my actual power is not that high. So I'm not that I'm being misled by my heart rate, but my sensations and the way that it felt probably didn't match the actual power I was doing later on in the time trial. Alex does a really good job then of getting back into a rhythm and riding at a pretty steady 358 watts average and 370 watts normalized for the next 40 minutes. Now I know I'm not capable of doing much different in terms of power output, but of course if I had no power meter there's no way of me validating that. So my theory is that I potentially rode the first 16 kilometers slightly too hard. Those first 2 climbs it's just slightly overcooked because I wasn't quite sure how hard I was going, how high, how much over FTP I was riding, even though I kind of felt okay because we're so early into the race that adrenaline and, you know, concentration and things like that are all at a high. But actually it probably came to bite me towards the end. Like I said, even though heart rate looked fine, even though I felt strong and I felt good, potentially the power was just not there. But we won't know. It's all hypothetical. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive, and I hope to get back training with power outside back on the road again soon. So thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.